We need to put some HOLDO maneuvers.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the HOLDO MANEUVER podcast. I'm Mark, and with me again, as always, is my friend Mike here.
We're a bunch of nouns. We're getting together.
Yeah. And then this week we have a new guest joining us, Adam. How do you pronounce your last name, Adam? I don't want to.
Molloy.
Molloy. Okay.
Molloy.
Yeah.
Adam Molloy. So we did another episode like this earlier in November. This episode will probably be out in December, but it's part of our Characters We're Thankful For series that we decided to do this year.
Keep it going. Do it whenever.
Yeah. Well, it was meant to be like themed around American kind of Thanksgiving, to be like, oh, thankful for. But yeah, so this is episode 60 of the podcast, and so the last episode we talked about Princess Leia Organa. This week we're going to talk about her brother, Luke Skywalker, which is
Whiny Pants.
which is Adam's favorite Star Wars character. But before we get into that,
I have something I got to ask you.
Yeah, I believe Mike had something to say.
Why did Luke Skywalker never become a stand-up comedian?
Couldn't hack it.
No, he could hack it because most comedians are hacks. But it's because all his dad jokes were always on the dark side.
Stunning.
Yeah. So this is our podcast, Adam.
Love it.
I thought it was perfect because it said his dad jokes were always on the dark. Like it just fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
perfect.
Usually we do like a round robin, but Mike likes to call it a square sparrow. So I'm gonna drop him out while I let you introduce why Luke is your favorite, kind of like preliminary why Luke is your favorite character, and specifically.
Right. It's kind of the idea. I know it's an archetype, but it's the idea of somebody. It's essentially hope personified, which I think is always really great to have in any piece of media. So it's the fact that he's sort of the everyman. He's plucked out of obscurity, and it's proof that anybody can be special. Anybody can be the hero. And so as a kid, I got picked on a lot. I got bullied, and I'm a Star Wars nerd, so that checks out. But I really saw myself in him, and I feel like so many people do, and that's really why I gravitated towards him. I think every kid growing up, a lot of people want to be like, oh yeah, I'm like Han Solo. I was never that guy, and I was never that cool, and I acknowledge that. But in the end, he's the one that I latch onto always throughout these 50 years now at this point.
Nice. Mike, what are like some of the reasons why you like Luke Skywalker?
Luke's a hard one for me because without him, we wouldn't really have the series. We wouldn't have what we have. He's still quintessential. Like Adam said, he was just a dude trying to go to Tosh to get some power converters, and he went on this epic adventure and became an amazing Jedi. Like every kid's dream. Like I never related to Han personally. I thought he was funny. Like he was that funny, cool kid, but I knew my place, if you will. Luke is just more in the sequel trilogy is more where I was like, that makes me thankful for him because he could have been this shining knight example and blah, blah, blah. But then he failed, and he took it so hard that he just became this grizzled old man who wants to live in the middle of nowhere, threw the map away. And I was like, that's real to me. He was real. It wasn't this shining knight that saves the day. Like he failed and had to get up. So he was someone who overcame stuff, overcame whatever. And that just, to me, you needed that when I was growing up. So,
like Yoda said to him in The Last Jedi, failure is the greatest teacher. or as Yoda would say it, failure, the greatest teacher is. So, but yeah, I think like also like growing up for me, I liked Luke a lot. I mean that saber was first. I mean, technically, chronologically, it was Anakin's saber first. Viewing order wise and how I experienced it, that was Luke's saber first. So like I had wanted that for like so badly, like growing up, and then even more so like after the prequel trilogy, because I'm a big Anakin guy too, but this is about his son, not not about him. But yeah, like that'll be something too that I want to get into a little bit later in this, is who actually is the chosen one, as it were. Is it Luke, or is it Anakin, or is it somebody else? But like, yeah,
Maybe
growing up, yeah,
maybe there isn't a chosen one.
yeah, maybe it's Jar Jar, maybe Jar
Never
Jar's
know.
chosen one. Yeah,
Could be that dude with the giant cone head.
oh, Kiadi Mundi, that
Yeah.
guy. But yeah, yeah, I think just growing up too, like you were saying, Adam, too, it was like everyone like wanted to be Han, or would say that they wanted to be Han, but the people, or I guess like a certain sect of I don't know, like younger dudes or younger women too, or however, watching it maybe leaned more towards Luke, just because of more of like his hero's journey, like within in the films there too, and that's something that I'd like us to talk about with that too, is just in general, like kind of is like his hero's journey from like where we begin with him in A New Hope to then Empire, then Return of the Jedi. We kind of touch a little bit like on all the stuff we kind of see him in there too, because like he shows up a bit there in Mandalorian at the end of season 2 there, a little bit of Book of Boba Fett, and then much later on in the sequel trilogy there too.
He'll keep coming back in some form.
And kind of like we did also for when we were talking about Leia and talking about Carrie Fisher, I think we definitely obviously need to talk about Mark Hamill as performer for Luke as well. We also have young Luke, just like we had a young Leia in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series too. He gets a little bit less screen time than Leia did, which is good, because like Luke gets enough screen time.
I was all Luked out at that point.
Yeah.
You
it's
were
interesting. Sorry,
lukewarm.
go ahead. Lukewarm.
the internal temperature of a tauntaun. Oh, it's gonna loop.
It's just gonna loop.
Yeah.
It's interesting that both of you said that growing up people would relate to Han. Now, Mark and I grew up in the same time frame, in the same area, basically next to each other. And I don't remember anyone besides like me and him talking about Star Wars in our little world. Like that's just like, it just didn't happen because we were in the dark ages, as you see, as it is between Star Wars movies. And I remember when the digitally enhanced sequels came out, not the prequels. Forgot what they're called.
Special edition.
Yeah, there you go. That's the word. That was like the first big moment where you heard about Star Wars outside of if you didn't know what it was already. So it's just interesting.
Yeah.
Because we just didn't have that. Like I don't remember ever hearing about it ever. And now it's everywhere.
Yeah, I think for me, I think I sort of dragged my friends into it. So it was just like a black hole. I just like sucked them in. Sarlacc pit, whatever. But yeah, I remember I have this memory of as a kid in recess. I was also a theater kid, so I was just trying to like put together a Star Wars play, and I had no producing experience. I was like, oh yeah, I got to play. I didn't have a script, and I was like, well, of course I'm going to play Luke Skywalker, and I basically. Anybody that bullied me, I said, okay, well, now you're going to be a pig guard, which I didn't know they're Gamorrean guards. But like, so basically, like, I lorded over my friends. I said, no, I know about Star Wars. So like, I kind of sucked them into the orbit, I think. Right. But It was, that was around when the special edition was coming out. So it was coming back, but I really don't know how I actually got into Star Wars because my parents are not fans. So I really don't know.
I don't remember the first time I watched it either, but I remember playing the Super Nintendo video game with Luke as the character and hating him with all my passion because he always died and didn't do what I wanted him to do.
Because those games are impossible.
Exactly. I know that now.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
I remember screaming at him very loudly that he sucked.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever I thought was funny language at that age.
Yeah, I think, like you were saying there too, is that to kind of put it in like other terms too, we all kind of, it seems like we were all kind of the Eric Formans of our friend groups, with like how much we were into Star Wars, and like how specifically much like if anybody that watched like that show, like how much Eric identified with Luke on that show too.
To this day, I go like this with doors, like I'm actually opening them.
I think everybody of a certain age would be like, well, even like little kids now would be doing that too. Like if you just kind of just subtly do it as you walk by like a door, and then if it doesn't open, then you just think of The Simpsons. You're like, oh, who did I sell my soul to? And that's why the door's not opening.
I think of Jay and Silent Bob. We're like, knock it off.
Actually, well, we can segue to that really quick now that you brought it up. We talked about Carrie Fisher last time with like showing up in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. She was the nun in that. Mm-hmm. Mark Hamill had a little bit bigger, like
meteor role.
Yeah,
a little bit ham-fisted. Yeah.
Hey kids, it's Mark Hamill. But yeah, like playing Sea Knocker. Because I don't want to say it and then like have this video get taken down. But just look up yeah. There you go.
Go on IMDb, yeah.
Yeah, just rock-a-doodle, but not that. But yeah. I just like what?
Rhymes with smock.
Yes. We're spending too much time on this. Anyways, like when he showed up in that, I think because that was the first like I watched Kevin Smith's movies in a very weird order, because that was the first one I saw of his films. A movie like basically essentially like his Avengers movie where it brought in all of his characters he had done up until that point. The movie's called Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back 2, so it's already
and Will Ferrell for some reason.
Oh yeah, named a character that alludes to Land of the Lost because he's Marshall, Will, and Holly, who would then go on to be in the Land of the Lost movie later on. But I remember like Mark Hamill in James Silent Bob Strike Back as himself playing Sea Knocker in that, and the whole scene there was funny. It was like, don't mess with the Jedi Master, son. But yeah, I mean, between like Mark Hamill's like roles like within Star Wars, and then like all of his voice work that he's done as well too. Obviously, people are gonna know that definitely. So if he had to be known for two things for his career, on screen, it would probably be Luke, and then voice over or voice artist wise, it would be for the Joker.
The Joker, yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's like, and there are like two different sides of the spectrum character wise for you, Adam. What we've as an artist for Mark Hamill, what is it that you like about Mark Hamill himself, kind of like, and like what he's done in his different roles and how he's come to them?
I love that he plays everything very earnestly, but also the fact that he can poke fun at himself. He can lean into the Star Wars thing. You know, he's got this huge list of cameos. You know, he's on The Simpsons. There's an episode of Just Shoot Me that I remember seeing as a kid that he was really, really great in. But It was that, and with the Joker, he even talks about the fact that when he was auditioning for that, he was on the way, and he said, I know I'm not going to get this. They're not going to cast Luke Skywalker as the Joker. He's the most iconic villain of all time. They're not going to cast Luke. He was rehearsing his sides on the 405 in L.A., and he said, "Yeah, I'm not going to get this." And of course, like whenever you say I'm not going to get this, that's the one you book anyway. But so the fact that
all the time.
Yeah, just say that every single time. You're going to be fine. But yeah, he just went into it just thinking, I'm going to have fun with this. I'm going to lean all the way into it. And I don't think he's ever held back on something. You can't ever accuse Mark Hamill of mailing something in.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Which is something I really appreciate, in
Maybe
terms
the
of
holiday special.
Yeah, that's that might be
mail
it.
that in.
We'll talk more about that next week. Yeah. How about you, Mike? What have been like some of your favorite things like about Mark Hamill?
I mean, just
the person, the actor.
Yeah. It's just amazing where he pops up. Like, yeah, he was the Joker, but just going through his IMDb page, there's so many random voices he's done and characters he's played, and you wouldn't know it.
Okay.
Like, it's just crazy. Like, he was even voiced characters in Star Wars, the sequel. Star Wars stuff. It's just, you wouldn't never have guessed it because you don't see his face. Like Han Solo, Harrison Ford, everywhere. Huge star. But then you think Mark Hamill's like, oh, he was just a schlub. He didn't do anything. But you look, and he did so much. He did more. He did way more. And it's just crazy. Like, I don't have a specific favorite. I just love the fact that all of a sudden he pops up somewhere. And you're like, hey, there he is.
Yeah.
Just keeps on going.
And I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it was like a mockumentary that he did like years ago. He directed it too, where he plays himself, the comic book, the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's like this like mockumentary where he like shot, I don't know if it was shot like at San Diego Comic Con or shot at a con, but it's like him like going around basically like all of the different people that he would know from like voice work and on-screen work. And it's just like this kind of tongue-in-cheek, kind of like in the style of like This Is Spinal Tap, or like one of like the Christopher Guest kind of like mockumentaries like that. But I would highly recommend it to people too, because if anyone's seen Alan Tudyk did like a mini, like a smaller show called Con Man too, that is kind of like in that same vibe as it. So if anyone's ever, these are two very small things I don't know if anyone's seen, but like comic book, the movie, I would definitely recommend to people to check out because it's, I think, a lesser known thing that he did, and it's him playing a version of himself in it, and it's just like him leaning into everything from just like Luke Skywalker stuff to Joker stuff in there too. So if you are a fan of Mark Hamill in general, I would highly recommend checking that out. So the next thing I want to kind of talk about with like Luke too is now, like you've brought up the sequel trilogy, and then of course we have the original trilogy with his character development between like the first three films, like where we meet him in like A New Hope, like a farm boy, and that, and you kind of get like the classic hero's journey to like after spoilers for a very now a 40-plus-year-old movie, when Uncle and Aunt Beru go to the barbecue.
Come French fries?
Yeah. Yes. But when he comes home, sees that they're dead, and then starts off on his journey there, kind of thrust into it from that. And then we see the progression like between like training with Yoda in Empire Strikes Back to kind of like fully embracing like Jedi knighthood in Return of the Jedi. And even like the glimpses that like we saw of him like in like The Mandalorian, like where you kind of get the Luke version of that scene from the end of Rogue One, but now it's Luke taking out a bunch of Empire remnant, First Order, precursor adjacent type, like the dark, what was it, like the
Dark Troopers.
Yeah, Dark Troopers. Yeah. On here, and it's if people have seen it, there's some cool edits too of like that, his like this scene cut together with the Vader scene in Rogue One, and you can kind of see like how similar some of the moves are too.
Mm-hmm.
and then of course in the sequel trilogy, he's it's whole 5 seconds in Force Awakens, and then like his very prominent role in Last Jedi with teaching Rey in that film, and then spoiler again for Last Jedi, where he basically exerts like all of that Force power, becomes one with the Force, and then he's a Force ghost in Rise of Skywalker. Through that journey, like what are some of your favorite moments of his character development through his story and through those films, Adam?
So in the original trilogy, I love that he basically takes the trajectory of anyone learning a new skill set or learning something new. Whereas when he starts training with Obi-Wan on the Falcon, he's doing the remote drill, and he's instantly just like, as soon as he starts to get it, he goes, "Oh my gosh, this is really cool. I love this." And then you see that progression into Empire, where he realizes that this is really hard. And when he trains with somebody else, he realizes that there's going to be loss, there's going to be sacrifice. This is not all going to be easy. And then, like you said, him moving into Return of the Jedi, where he settles into knighthood, but it's really, in my opinion, just kind of what he thinks Jedi knighthood is.
Yeah.
He's, I love the beginning, the first act of Return of the Jedi, because it's, it's a swashbuckler pirate movie, basically. And I wondered as a kid why I loved it so much, but it's just Luke with like that signature Luke Skywalker, like chopping wood lightsaber style, just, and, that's what he thinks that being a Jedi is. And you can even tell in his demeanor, he's, if Alec Guinness trained you, that's the way you would talk. Everybody says, "Oh, Luke's very stoic." He's, he's sort of, I think, putting that on, because he thinks that's how Jedi are supposed to act. And then, you see him with the Emperor, once he finally stops fighting, that's when he embraces being a Jedi and wins. And so I love that arc. And I love that in the sequels, he does have to do that again, because you don't end up in a certain spot and stay there.
Yeah.
Or if you do, then you're
straight line.
Yeah. It's like you or if you do, it's not that interesting and it's not a story.
Yeah.
So, but I love that original trilogy arc, because it's very relatable. And I think that's why a lot of people relate to Luke, because that's kind of how everybody acts when they're learning a new skill set or trying, going on a new journey.
I agree. How about, hey, Mike? Because you said you've leaned towards the sequel trilogy. So, and we kind of like already hinted at it too. Like he essentially evolves into Hermit Obi-Wan, more or less, because that's who he learned from. But what is it that, besides the green milk, what is it that you like the
Blue
most?
milk?
Yeah. No, in Last Jedi, it's green milk.
I don't remember. But you just look at his story, like, then the more I think about it, the more stuff comes out. You look at Leia had where she got put, and how she had all this confidence, all this upbringing. She didn't need to know who her father was, because she thought Bail was her father. And then Luke had Uncle Owen, and he just seems like he was a bastard to him. The more we learned, the more like Luke yearned to have this father that loved him, and he never truly got it, except for like when he burns his dad. Like he has to basically bury his dad. Like he's got that brief little window where Vader like protects him and throws the Emperor in the pit, and then he tries to rebuild the Jedi Order, and like he's just full of failures he has to overcome. And that's a compelling story to me then. Oh, your dad is the greatest villain Jedi ever, and now you are too. Happy ending. Like I'm glad they didn't do that, because it just adds that layer of like, oh my God, he failed so bad at what he was trying to do. He decided to throw his X-Wing in the ocean and just live amongst these, I don't know what they were called, drinking the milk all day. And when Rey comes to see him, he's just like this old curmudgeon, not like Obi-Wan, who was like, "Oh yes, I knew your father. Here's his lightsaber. Look at it." Like,
yeah.
And then he had to make the decision, like, okay, I got to get out of my shit and help you guys in whatever way I can, even if that means me dying and becoming a Force ghost, if you will. Like, yeah. His story, like, they gave him an arc. They didn't just, okay, here's Plateau and just leave him there, and every time you see him thereafter, he's just this amazing Jedi. savior of the universe. They let him fall back down.
Yeah,
And
I think
Hamill plays that so well. Like, you don't really appreciate Luke until the sequel comes, in my opinion, until the sequel trilogy.
because he's been through it a little bit more, I guess. By that point.
Because in the first episode 4, it's all new to him. It's all shiny. It's all excitement. Then Empire comes out, and it's kind of like that. I love Empire. It's a great movie, but Luke in that is just like overzealous, and he gets knocked down. Then he comes back in Jedi, and he's this huge hero again. But then he has this moment where he almost kills the Emperor, or something. He's like that hesitation of the dark side when they're in that scene, and they quickly subdue that. And then you don't see anything for years, and we get that cool resolution in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, and I do like too that he's like not a perfect like character, you know, like not like he brings it up a little bit in like the Last Jedi, like the legend of Luke Skywalker is like bigger than like him as an actual like being, and talking like basically like all the stuff he learns about the Jedi post Return of the Jedi, and he's like, oh man.
There's a lot we've all learned since Return of the Jedi.
The sacred texts. But yeah, like that's some of my favorite stuff in there too. Is because he's not a perfect person. Like he makes like that mistake with Ben, aka Kylo, like where he's like he
tries to kill him.
Well, he has that momentary like lapse of like judgment, just long enough where like Ben wakes up and is like, "Hey, Uncle, what you trying to kill me?"
Was it a lapse of judgment, or was it the smart thing to do that he quickly was like, "I can't kill someone because it's not part of the Jedi way"? I don't know.
He got that little glimpse of the future, and he read it in a certain way, but he didn't read always in motion the future is. But yeah, I liked that about it too. And then like one of my favorite things in The Last Jedi too is like his whole thing with Rey in there too. He's like, what am I gonna do? Go take on the entire First Order with just a laser sword? And then the fact that he does do that. Yeah. And I like for like people paying attention during that scene, you're like, wait, why does he have the blue Anakin saber there that we just saw get ripped in half like a couple scenes ago? So I always
as we saw in Ahsoka, he can quickly build a lightsaber.
Yeah.
I just love that it's also just like, how can I get in Kylo's head the most? Yeah. You know, let me change how he looked the last time he saw me. I'm gonna have a cool outfit, cool lightsaber that he's always wanted. Yeah.
It's amazing. Everything you just said was wrong.
And you know, going back to the Legend of Luke Skywalker thing too, I love that, and I love that he, you know, talked about that, because you know it would be impossible to live up to the legend that certain group of the fans seemed to want from The Last Jedi, where they wanted him to take down a lightsaber or take down a Star Destroyer with the Force and have 6 lightsabers and Force, you know, use Force lightning on everything and become a god. And that's a video game. That's, you know, and so the fact that that's the fact that he, and you know,
he still could do it.
Yeah, the game
still could do it.
The game is fun, but it's just like, that is not an interesting story, you know, in terms of a character. Like Luke Skywalker doing that, you know, he did the most Jedi thing he possibly could to solve that conflict. Didn't spill a drop of blood, wasn't actually there, bought time for the Resistance to escape, bought time for the Jedi Order to essentially rebuild. So, you know, I love that he did the most powerful thing he could and used probably the most powerful Force power that he possibly could, but he didn't have to kill anyone to do it.
Nice. He even used the Force to knock over Mike's mic.
That was the dog. That was the dog shaking underneath the table.
But yeah, I mean, I just, and then so there's this little bit of Luke that we have in this like current like Mandoverse era currently right now, that's like a mix of, and I feel that I forget the performer's name who's like doing that actual like physical like work for Luke within it. Mike's gonna look it up while I'm talking about
That's
it. I know that Mark Hamill is on set doing parts of the performance as well too, and that it's like a mixture of like his work, the person's name that Mike's looking up right now's work, the re-speecher technology, like the deepfake technology. It's like a
Yeah.
conglomeration of like all of this stuff into like this.
Max Lloyd.
Okay,
Is
Max.
that who that
Okay.
is?
I think there's two of them. I think there was
Yeah,
one for Mando and one for Book
For
of Boba Fett.
Fett. Yeah, and then I know it's a they hired someone that did like a deep fake of that scene on
Yeah.
YouTube to come in for the Book of Boba Fett version. But what's kind of like your take on like that little era of Luke where he's he's setting up that new Jedi Order that may or may not be the one that Ben Solo is in those sequel trilogy flashbacks, and where he's training Grogu for that like short period of time, and also giving him like a dealing in absolutes kind of choice there too. It's like wait Luke, that's only Sith deals in absolutes, and that
Yeah.
statement in and of itself is also an absolute.
Yeah.
So
And that's how you get Darth Grogu. Yeah.
Darth Grogu.
That's why Grogu's gonna show up in that new Rey trilogy and be like, "So I'm the bad guy in this."
So according to this, Mark Hamill played Luke Skywalker in Book of Boba Fett.
I think it's like a mixture of like all this different stuff.
IMDb is letting me down.
I remember the first name being Graham. I just said I'll remember it in like an hour.
Well,
but
yeah. So like, what is I guess so like what are your guys' takes on like this Mando era Luke, which kind of seems like it is partially giving like some of those fans that wanted like the Luke that pulls down the Star Destroyer kind of Luke, mixed with like that because it's like just like 5 years after Return of the Jedi for this version of Luke. So what do you guys think?
I think that it's kind of. I think Luke hit a few stumbling blocks, and I think it's showing that he's still finding his footing with that Jedi Order. And I think he kind of slips back into that whole hero thing, and that's why you kind of get that action sequence. And they also set it up so that he doesn't have to actually kill a person. He's just chopping through droids. So they still want to maintain that kind of non-violence thing. But there's a Luke scene that I love in Battlefront 2 on PS4, and basically there's again, spoilers for a 6-year-old game at this point, but he saves an Imperial, and the Imperial says, why did you save me? He goes, well, because you asked. And I said, okay, that's Luke Skywalker. It's the same thing. He's kind of chopping through a bunch of alien bugs, and so they don't want to show him killing too many people. Kills a couple stormtroopers, but it's that same thing. It's you kind of get that sort of, it appeases the people that want that power fantasy, but also it's the same character. You just see him kind of stumbling and learning as he sets up that new Jedi Order or orders, depending on which one it is.
Yeah. Essentially, my thought is, it's just Luke trying to do something with very little guidance yet again, doing the best he can. He's going to fail. He's going to do that. It just kind of felt forced, if you will. The Grogu stuff where he's like, you see him like they were forcing that's Yoda's kid vibe, having him do the same thing Yoda did for him for Grogu. But
where it was kind of like almost like the inverse of like the Yoda Luke scene, but it's just like Grogu and Luke scene there, but using like riding on his back and whatnot.
I mean, the only interesting thing you think like is Grogu had a father figure he wanted to be with, so he was just like, I don't care about being a Jedi. Where in Luke's story is like, I must be a Jedi because my father was a Jedi, and like he was better than Uncle Owen. So
one of the things in this era too that I kind of hope that they maybe play around with more. I thought maybe we might have seen it in the Ahsoka series. Was Ahsoka's in that Book of Boba Fett episode 2, like hanging out essentially, I guess, with Luke. And I would like to see, if there's any interaction of two characters, I'd like to see more of it be like those two, just because of that shared connection they have of
I knew
Anakin
your
slash
dad.
slash Vader. Yeah, like she says, like something that's like, "Oh, you're so much like your dad," or something, like within that book of books. It's like I want more of like that stuff. I want to know
Hmm.
what's going on
Well,
there, like with that
Ahsoka
friendship
takes
and all.
place how short after Jedi?
Well, we
Or
find out in
before?
Ahsoka that it's after season 3 of Book of Boba Fett because of like what they talk about with like
Okay, I
Moff,
couldn't remember.
Moff Gideon and whatnot. So I was like, because my whole theory going into Ahsoka was that like maybe like that first half of it was gonna like lead up to like where we see her in Book of Boba Fett, and then they drop like that, be like, this is where we are in the timeline,
Hmm.
line basically, and they're like, oh well, there goes that theory of it's gonna catch up to that. But I would like to see more of that, just because I think there's like story potential there with those two kind of interacting with one another. Now, if we do see more of Luke within like this Mando era, do you want? I guess what's your opinion on them continuing to do this like kind of amalgamation of it? Should because
Doesn't matter
because
really. They're gonna
because
do what
like
they want.
yeah, I guess because I mean this way it's still involving Mark Hamill in some form or function, like being there for it, or if they're gonna have more Luke on screen at this point with like doing different stuff as character during this era, should they just recast someone
Yeah.
for that time? Like I remember like there's like a huge campaign for a very long time for just to have Sebastian Stan play like as a fan cast for that that era of Luke because of how similar he kind of looks to 1970s, early 1980s Mark Hamill. Um, if if he continues on, what would you just want it the same way they've been doing it, or would you want them at this point just to have Mark Hamill hand the baton over to somebody else to
I'd
play
want them to
Luke if they're going to
recast
keep
it
him?
personally.
Yeah, I'm on team recast.
Like you can't hold on to the images of those from like you just can't. You're gonna just make such crap if you do, because then it's more about seeing that person than the story, seeing Mark Hamill, seeing Carrie Fisher, seeing Harrison Ford than it is telling a good story. Like that's what you want people to
Yeah,
focus on.
And you're not going to get as good of a performance no matter what out of
Right.
that amalgamation of whatever they do than if they just cast someone else. And so yeah, I think if they really feel like they need to keep the legacy characters going, then I think they should recast them. And I think you get more longevity out of that anyway. And they can
Or-
have bigger roles in these stories if you want them to.
yeah.
Or they
And
can
it's
animate
a little
it.
bit cheaper.
Mark Hamill can voice it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, he did a Forces of Destiny or something a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You can hear the age in his voice a little bit, but it's still him. It's great.
Oh yeah, that's kind of like the same thing in like Dial of Destiny, where like they de-aged
Harrison
Harrison Ford in that, but he
Mhm.
still sounds like 80-year-old Harrison Ford.
Mhm.
Yeah.
At least it's not Robert De Niro Irishman, where he's like supposed to be like 25 and that, and he's like kicking somebody like he's in his 80s because he is in his
Hey,
80s.
he's got a new baby.
And even Harrison Ford, when he was in his late 30s, like he still had the old man energy anyway.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so
mean,
I think that totally works. Yeah.
eternally old grumpy man energy, like since he was like in his 20s.
Yep. My hero. Great.
Uh, and also like because the re-speecher thing, it sounds okay with Vader, and like James Earl Jones like signed off like basically like the rights to his voice for like Vader to continue on as long as they wanted to, because that already is kind of supposed to be like a mechanized like
Right.
voice
With all the
modulator anyways, 'cause
breathing
it's-
and all that stuff around it.
yeah, so that already sounds closer. I mean, that doesn't sound as weirdly robotic as it technically is, because it's already kind of supposed to be that way, whereas with Luke it's just like a
Yeah.
dude talking.
And
Recast and train with the people who are still alive to get the characters right.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think Mark Hamill would also be on board with that. I think he would gladly hand off the baton and be
Yeah.
super supportive of whoever ended up getting cast. But I think also with those characters, like the more of a barrier you can put in between, like for Vader's voice, it's kind of like in Rogue One with the Tarkin thing.
Oh yeah.
I think that, you know, I think that was great for the time, and I thought it looked really great. But if you would have just put him in a hologram or something, I would have bought that 110%.
Right.
And I think the same thing with like a deep fake Luke. I think, yeah, if he's talking through a hologram or there's some distortion, you know, you can get away with a lot more. But if they want him to be main characters, yeah, I think you got to recast.
Yeah, because I feel like, especially because they're gonna with like the Filoni kind of like Mando kind of team up movie that they're gonna end up getting to. I feel like they're gonna have Luke in that because they've introduced him in Mando and then he was in Book of Boba Fett. So I think at that point he's gonna be part of whatever that team of these characters coming together in those stories is, which should be interesting. But yeah, like you're saying, and I think too that Mark Hamill had to like kind of signed off or like been cool with the idea of like when the Sebastian Stan like fan casting was like going around of playing a younger Luke, like he was like, oh yeah, I like Sebastian Stan, that'd be cool with me if he played him. So
Yeah.
um
You'll
and
never get 100% acceptance. So you just
yeah,
bite the bullet and do it. And
yeah, it's because I mean like you guys were saying too, like with the deepfake, it's always gonna, no matter how good it like potentially gets technology wise with that, it's always gonna have like this hint of like uncanny valley to it that is there's something like just not quite right with it.
Mm-hmm.
But and speaking of kind of like handing the baton off and whatnot too, with the character of Luke Skywalker too, like just kind of like the cultural impact of the character and becoming like a symbol of like in the power of storytelling, and which often gets like referenced or has like influenced like so many like sci-fi stories like since Star Wars came out. You could probably name off like so many like films in the 80s that were trying to kind of pull like that kind of archetype of Luke Skywalker like into like the characters for their films, and like even like now today like with stuff like that too, like even though like it's a very different movie but kind of similar in the same way, like The Last Starfighter is kind of sort of like a Luke Skywalker archetype in that.
Mm-hmm.
But like what do you guys think about kind of like the lasting cultural impact of Luke and like how that character is still influencing like different movies and books and stories and stuff that are coming out now?
Yeah, it's an archetype that's existed for such a long time, and it really brought it to the forefront, I think. And like you said, in the 80s, people wanted to jump onto that. And so, yeah, I don't think it's gonna go away. And I think that it really, Luke Skywalker appearing in these movies really bumped that up. And like we were saying too, it's the fact that not only was he that archetype of this, you know, farm boy nobody that turned into the one, the chosen one, whatever you want to call it, but they also gave him a third act that, you know, he struggled, he sort of reverted, he, you know, he had to come to terms with things. So it took that archetype and then added to it. And so I think that really opens up a lot of other stories too. You can create more complex archetypes, you can combine types of characters, and that's sort of what happened eventually with Luke. So I think that's kind of the lasting impact there too, is you can expand on these archetypes.
exactly. And when I think about it, Luke Skywalker is mentioned culturally way more than just about any other Star Wars character. He's referenced, or like Mark Hamill is asked to play him more than any other. You'd think Han Solo, but not really. It's just like his character and what Hamill put into him has lasted 50 years. People still want to see that character because of how it resonates and how it's it's tangible that's like that you could be that character more than any other one.
Yeah. I think like a lot of I think modern characters or like more contemporary characters are almost an amalgamation of both like Luke's, like if you mix Luke Skywalker with Marty McFly, that kind of feels like what like a lot of like the, if there's like a main male hero or character that's gonna have like this hero progression or development in something, the character is usually some kind of mix, or on one farther side of the spectrum, one or another of those two characters. Like, and you can see that in like a bunch of stuff, whether it's like Huey, maybe like even kind of like in like The Boys is kind of like that, or even I don't know, I said that and now that's the only one that I could think of, but or like even like kind of like a Tom Holland's version of Peter Parker is kind of like a good. He's more Marty McFly than he is Luke Skywalker, but I don't know. I think you can really see like that influence, like we talked about. Um, uh, that 70s show. I mean, like that whole show is set in the 70s, but like how much of like an impact Star Wars and then Luke specifically had for the character Eric Foreman on that show, and like how it kind of, you know, that even like was like a big pinpoint, like a lot of the storytelling in that show sometimes too. So I think it's interesting, just like how like where it's gone to, like where it may go to, and then kind of wrapping up. Is there anything else about Luke Skywalker that we haven't talked about yet that you'd want to speak on or bring up before we close out for this episode, Adam or Mike?
Yeah, I just it's really just Mark Hamill's performance and just kind of knowing what I know about him, in real life too. It's just he kind of exemplifies that hopeful person, just just retaining that positivity even when you screw up, even when you misstep.
Right.
I think that's kind of why he and Luke, they've become intertwined. One, because like it's his most famous character that he's played, but two, because they share a lot of similarities. And so the fact that he kind of embodies that character, in and out of the movies, is really special to me.
Yeah, agreed. Because you seldom see reports, pictures, posts, whatever, of people meeting him being like, "Wow, he was an ass." You just don't really hear about that. You hear so much like, "Oh, he was great. He posed however you ask. He has fun with it. He imbibes like what you want when you meet someone from like these type of roles." Like I've heard like Harrison Ford just like won't talk about Star Wars with fans and certain times. Like Alec Guinness was just embarrassed to be in Star Wars, and but Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher too they're just like, yes, come talk to me. They give you like you're welcome by like they don't try and shun you and make you feel bad for loving their character, loving their work. And then you got the whole character of Luke being the everyman, being the tangible one. Like, okay, I can see myself in that role. Not like, okay, he's a space cowboy. I can't be that. He's a Wookiee. I can't be that. Like, he just
Let your hair growing up, you could.
nah, hair doesn't grow that fast. Not you. But
Yeah,
it's just a great character and great person who played him. Whether you enjoy it, like whether his performance is Oscar worthy or not, like you can't picture Luke Skywalker without Mark Hamill.
I agree.
And we almost had to because of the car wreck.
Yeah, that could have went a different way. And I do kind of like how they wrote that into Empire Strikes Back with like the Wampa swiping at his face to kind of give a reason for why he might have had the scarring on his face there. But yeah, I I love the character of Luke Skywalker, and like you were saying too, like our one of our former guests, Kayla from Geeked F Out. I guess she had gone to there's a con in San Francisco this past weekend or so. Mark Hamill, it was there, and she got to get a photo with him there. That's like when they do like the cons with like where you can do like the photo ops and stuff like that. That's like on my like bucket list of the people that I would love to meet. Like right there with Michael J. Fox, Mark Hamill, Michael J. Fox, or like kind of like tied for two of the people that I would love to The only thing that stinks about photo ops though is that, as opposed to like when you do like the autographs with them, is that photo ops literally you're like they pop you in there. It's like 2 seconds. There's a photo, and then you're done. Like sometimes with the autograph, you get at least like a minute to talk to the person at least.
Right.
So that's it is what it is, I guess, with that, because they gotta so many people that have to get through those things. But that's
Right.
again showing like his cultural impact too, and like a lot of the times when he's at one of these cons, you can see like how long the line is gonna be for him, or like how packed a panel is gonna be for him talking about. He could be in there talking about literally anything. People would go in there and listen to him
Right.
talk because he's just a cool dude. Even if he does spell his name wrong, so you gotta spell the C,
Yeah.
not the K.
I think if you meet him, you should tell him that.
Yeah,
There you go.
well, I did that joke with what's his name, Mark. What the hell's his freaking name? Oh, the guy that played Jacob on Lost. His name's Mark, and I feel bad that I can't. He was also Lucifer on Supernatural.
Yeah.
I know what he looks like. I just can't think of his name.
Well, if he spelled it with a C, you might remember.
Yeah,
There you
but
go.
he spelled it with a K. But yeah, like anyways, I think that like the character of Luke Skywalker is important. What the character has done for like storytelling and films over like the past 40 plus years has been, amazing. Mark Hamill, whether it's as Luke Skywalker or as the Joker or just himself, has been
Oops.
little
Didn't-
gold.
Didn't mean to do that one.
Yeah, I think that just kind of there's
That's what
not
I
really a
meant
way
to
to. There you go. Mark Pellegrino was the character.
I didn't want to
the
interrupt.
actor. But yeah, I mean it's hard to put in words, but I think we've all kind of said exactly why we like him so much. But Luke Skywalker, awesome character. Mark Hamill, cool guy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Agreed.
So, with that, that'll wrap it up for episode 60. So where can they find you online, Adam?
Yeah, I'm on the.
If you want people to find you.
No, please don't find me. No, it's on the socials. I'm on Blue Sky at Adam Molloy bsky.social, Twitter at Adam J Molloy, Instagram and Threads Adam.Molloy. Just kind of do like a Google search of my name because it's different on every single social. Plus a website coming soon. And yeah, so it's MOLLOY for anybody
There you go.
listening and not seeing it. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Very nice.
Fun fact: in a lot of scripts I've written, I love using the name Molloy. I don't know why.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah, it's got a good ring, and I like my name too because it's just one word. It's just Adam Molloy. So
Nice. Or was it Mike? It was like Lucius Malloy, or I don't know. There was one character like in a short film that we did that Mike was like Molloy something. I don't. Yeah,
I just like the name.
Yeah,
Molloy.
he uses it a
I use
lot.
yeah,
I don't know why.
Yeah.
I got it from The Simpsons, and I just ran with it.
Oh,
yeah. If you're writing like a gruff Irish cop, it's really great. Yeah,
Malloy Pudnowski.
There you go.
That's what the name was.
that's great.
Right.
And that sounds like a disgruntled Irish
forgot.
cop, Malloy
Yeah.
Pudnowski. He
he
was
was,
a day from retirement.
No, he was a gimpy villain who had an illegitimate son, and because of his disability, he manipulates people into doing things for him any way he can. That was his character, inspired by Lloyd Forbes, if you remember him.
Shout out Lord Forbes from Auburn, New York. You guys, if you can leave us a review on the podcast catcher of your choice, if it allows you to do so, helps us out a lot. You can find the show on social media on Twitter and Blue Sky at HoldoPod, Instagram HoldoPod, Facebook HoldoPod, YouTube HoldoPod. And then Mike and I are also on all those places, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, at our
We're
first
here,
and
we're
last
there, we're
names. Yeah, you can call us Roy Kent, just don't call us late for dinner. But as always, we are grateful to George Lucas for creating the Star Wars universe.
Oh dear, thank the maker.